Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And the movie I want to talk about today is from 1971, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, starring Warren Beatty, Julie Christie, directed by Robert Altman, and including much of Robert Altman's stock company, who become quite familiar through, especially through the movies of this era: Rene Auberjonois, Shelley Duvall, Michael Murphy, Burt Remsen, John Shuck. And there's more. There's several more there if you have a sharp eye for some of the familiar character actors that Altman loved to employ. And this is a Western, but it's a kind of untraditional Western in its look for sure. It was filmed actually about 40 miles outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. So we have a northwest look to a Western, so there's no deserts, there's no Monument Valley, there's no majestic Rocky Mountains. This is green mountains, and with lots of rain, and that's what they wanted. They wanted this rainy look, and eventually snow, which was unusual for the area, and it's a happy accident because I think one of the points of this atmospheric is the snow, which we get in the finale of the movie. And this is also textured with the cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond. He flashed the negative, so the studio hated that technique, but they couldn't do anything about it because they were doing it to the negative, which gives it another kind of softer, less lit. There's lots of dark scenes in this film that I think the 4K really picks up beautifully. And we get the overlapping dialogue, which is probably one of the things I've never been fond of overlapping dialogue, but it does add to the atmosphere for sure. And then we get the Leonard Cohen songs. There's three songs Cohen's used here. That was something that came in post-production where Altman was at a party. He heard they were playing an album by Cohen, and Altman was familiar with the songs, but he thought they would just match so beautifully. So when he went back to where they were doing the post-production, they added quite a few songs. They ended up with three, and I think they're beautifully suited to the images, and even some of the lyrics seem to apply directly to some of the themes in the movie and the characters in the movie. So into this textured look comes Warren Beatty. He comes into town. He's a gambler. He seems like a bit of a hustler. The town is in its infancy. He sees potential. He has entrepreneurial skills. He sees himself, this is a place for me. He's going to be a big fish in a small pond, and he builds up the town, and he's very skillful in his use of how he employs people. The town is now on the map, and it draws the attention of Mrs. Miller. So Mrs. Miller comes to town. She is an expensive whore from Seattle, and but she knows the ropes. She has common sense. She has business acumen. She quickly becomes McCabe's partner, and they were going to spruce things up. We have to invest money to make it better. So now the town has gotten on the map, but then that draws the interest of corporate capitalism with a murderous impulse, and they certainly did have a murderous impulse in these days. Maybe they still do. But here McCabe is out of his step, and he fumbles, and he sets off a chain of events that he cannot really prevent. So this is a film, and Altman didn't usually work with movie stars, but Beatty had really wanted to do this film, and he was ultimately the financial impetus. He was able to get, Beatty was a star and a big-time celebrity along with Julie Christie, so he came on board, and then Julie Christie came on board to be Mrs. Miller, and she's kind of a deglamorized Julie Christie, but she is absolutely beautiful, and Vilmos Zsigmond gives her some absolutely gorgeous close-ups in this film, which is often because of this atmosphere, because McCabe is not the traditional Western hero. This film was often seen as a revisionist Western, an anti-Western. Now, when I saw it in 1971, that didn't strike me. Young men of my age in 1971 had been brought up on Westerns. This was, this was another Western. It had similar themes as Westerns we've seen in the past. And it has attention to it. Once the corporate world gets involved, and we have the battle of the small-time entrepreneur versus the corporate capitalism, we see the tension building up. There's great villains in this movie. It comes from a novel, and much of the novel we learn in the extras. Much of the novel is in the movie. McCabe's character is a little bit different, but the themes, and that was a traditional Western novel. I guess it didn't have much literary merit, but much of that, that tension, that building up tension that you could see in High Noon, or in my last video on Maywan, had that same Western element of tension building up to the ultimate showdown. Now, Altman was a director who was very suited to his times in this period. He had made MASH a couple years before. MASH was a huge hit. And so he could draw on that, I guess we'll give him a try, because Altman was known in Hollywood as a rebel, as somebody who was always wanting to do something different, because even though this is Altman's first Western, I'm pretty much sure that he never made another Western. But he made a lot of Western television shows. In fact, he was I think he directed like 8 Bonanzas in 1960, 8 episodes of hour-long Western that was the top-rated television show in the U.S. And all kinds of other television episodes. But now he meets his time. Now he always wanted to do different things. He was constantly getting fired. So he had a reputation as being part of the anti-establishment, as a maverick, as somebody who wanted to do something different, as somebody who didn't glorify the American mythology. So his time was right for this kind of individual. And the audiences, Warner Brothers, had been in some deep financial trouble. In fact, they were owned by Kinney Shoes. And those of you my age might remember Kinney Shoes. They actually owned Warner Brothers at this time. And so with this new audience, this young audience, what kind of films can we make for them? Well, MASH was a hit. MASH was an anti-establishment kind of film. So the times were right for Altman. And he really took advantage of it. And I've often marveled at the kind of at the kind of artists who meet their time. And of course, Altman had a long career and made a lot of good films. But in this period with The Long Goodbye and with MASH and Brewster McCloud, Images, Nashville, it seemed where he was really in tune with the audience of his time, and I think he really took advantage of them. I've always viewed him as a kind of romantic pessimist, as somebody who had poetry in him. Now McCabe mumbles his way through much of this movie, and he says, "I got poetry in me," as he wants to woo Mrs. Miller. But I think there's poetic images in here, especially in the finale. I don't think anybody can forget the finale of McCabe and Mrs. Miller after they've seen it. Of course, all this is driven by the Vietnam War and the young people protesting the war, and the endless casualties in 1971 that was still going on full blown, and seemed to be no end. And so we were pessimists, but we were romantics too, I believe. Peace, love, and understanding, and a different way of life. A way of life where you can see it clearly, and see some truth in the world around you. What is truth in the world around you? Obviously, we're struggling. The United States struggling big time with that particular challenge. It's also a movie about movie stars. Altman says that using Beatty here, not just for the financial security of getting the film made, but also that Beatty had substance to him. So, and Christie, he said it was a bonus because, you know, it was Beatty that was the driving force behind the studio approving the film. So he had charisma. People knew who he was, and Christie and he were two of the most beautiful movie stars of all time, and certainly of that time. And even though Julie Christie is deglamorized here, you know, the beauty it does show through in many of the scenes, and the film wasn't a hit. Now, I didn't remember that. I thought it was. I thought they played for a while. I think I probably saw it 2-3 times in its initial release. They were almost immediately on the repertory circuit. So if you wanted to see it on the big screen, which is the optimal way to see McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And in the extras, we see 2 interviews from the Dick Cavett show. For those of you who don't know who Dick Cavett was, he's still around. He was a talk show host opposite Johnny Carson. I think he once was a writer on the Carson show. So, but Carson was, you know, so funny that there was no way to compete with that. So he would get really good guests on. So you'd watch the monologue, Carson's monologue, and at least for me, I would turn on Cavett to see who he would have. He was a terrible interviewer. He was awkward, and but for some reason, he got people to say interesting things. So here we get Pauline Kael coming on, and she loses no time in saying, "Oh, you got to go see McCabe and Mrs. Miller. This has been trashed by some of the newspaper critics, but it's a great film." And the movie got lots of really good reviews. Andrew Sarris, Kael's polemical enemy in the world of movie reviewing, he also thought it was a terrific film. Excuse me. It's in the Library of Congress today. It's, I think, one of Altman's terrific films, and from this period there were several terrific films. The Long Goodbye was probably my favorite Altman, but it's also a terrific Western, and I'd say it's in the Library of Congress now. So whatever difficulties people had at the time as far as seeing something textured in a way, maybe even the leisurely pace of the film, it works beautifully today. I was not disappointed. I don't think it will be either. McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Thanks a lot for listening. I appreciate it.